Hello and welcome back for another interview on City of God. My name is Ben Walker. I'm here today with, once again, one of the developers on City of God, Bryn Fox. Bryn, how you doing?
Hello, Ben. Yes, I'm doing well. Yeah, how are you?
All right, I'm all right. Fantastic. So we're going to be talking today chiefly about the creeds, okay, which is a really integral part of City of God. It is similar in some ways to factions in other properties. Clans maybe in VTM have some similarities. Bryn, can you tell us a little bit about what creeds are in City of God and what they represent?
So, creeds in City of God are sub-factions within the church. So you have the Christian church, the early Christian church in the 5th, 6th century AD, where the game is set. And what has happened in the world of City of God that differs from actual history is the Nicene Creed, the big agreement in the 300s AD, which effectively standardized a lot of early Christianity. And I mean, there were schisms and there were various factions in real history that were outside of the Nicene Creed, but you had this big agreement, the Council of Nicaea in the 300s AD, that brought all of Christianity, most of Christianity, together under this one agreed creed. And effectively, in the world of City of God, that consensus around the Nicene Creed has collapsed. So, because of all of the things that have happened in City of God, because the world of City of God, the history of City of God is darker and more destructive than in real life, and particularly in terms of the Christian Church. The Christian Church is not in a stronger position as it would have been in this period in real life. The city of Rome, it wasn't just sacked by Goths and Vandals, it was destroyed entirely. The city of Rome is ruins. Nobody lives there anymore. You have a lot more pagan influence in the world of City of God. There's a lot more a lot of these peoples like Goths and Vandals and Huns, who were largely or progressively Christianized, particularly as they came to live in the lands of the former Roman Empire. A lot of those groups remain unchristianized and still worship the pagan religions that they traditionally worshipped. So the Christian church has completely splintered, and you have these four creeds, which are four ways of thinking about Christianity and ways of thinking about the world. And as missionaries in City of God, as exorcist demon hunters, you serve the Vigilant Order. And the Vigilant Order has these four creeds, this schism within it as well. So different people in the Vigilant Order follow these different creeds, and they get along to lesser or greater extent depending on the creed. But you have this factional schism, and as a missionary, you are a member of one of these creeds. You follow one of these doctrines.
So let's talk about the creeds then as they stand. We've got four in total. We have the Michaelite Creed, the Longinian Creed, the Junian Creed, and the Augustinian Creed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, first let's start from the top with the Michaelite Creed. Summarise the Michaelite Creed for me. What do people who adhere to the Michaelite Creed generally believe?
Okay, so first of all, I'm going to say the image that we're showing you has the four creed symbols on it, these coats of arms for the creed. They're not, so we're going to go through them in the order that they are in the book. So in the book they are the Michaelite, the Longinian, the Junian and the Augustinian. They're not in this order in this image, so I'm going to tell you what the symbol for each creed is as I talk about it. So we're going to start on the left. We have the lion on the shield. That is the Michaelite Creed.
Brilliant.
The Michaelite Creed are the warriors of Christ. That's the sort of tagline we have for the creed, and these represent the this sort of martial view of Christianity, this idea of the Christian church is beset by a war. You know, it's being attacked. They are fighting a war, not just against non-Christian, pagans and things like that, but against these darker forces as well, demons, the forces, the primordial forces of evil, and they view themselves as soldiers in that war. So in the current setting of City of God, in the time period where City of God is set, the Pope is a member of the Michaelite Creed, and they view themselves as I said, these soldiers. So people who tend to be part of the Michaelite Creed, very often they are physically warriors, soldiers, people who see this as a physical fight to be won, a physical and a spiritual fight, but also a physical fight against the forces of evil and the forces that seek to harm Christianity and the faithful. So within that, there are various kind of subtypes of Michaelite. So when you create a missionary in City of God, you choose convictions and sins. You have 3 convictions, 3 sins. You choose those from the list of the creed. So we have a list of convictions and sins for each creed. So for the Michaelites, what this is being brave and being strong and fighting for Christianity and fighting against non or anti-Christian forces. So on the one hand, you have this kind of nobility to the Michaelite, this kind of chivalry, like a sort of Arthurian knight, who protect the weak, protect the innocent, who don't back down from fights, don't run away when the going gets tough. But on the darker side, you have this violence, this brutality. So on the darker side of the Michaelite Creed, you have people who perhaps wouldn't think twice about burning a whole village of pagans to the ground, because they're not Christian, they're the enemies of Christianity. This is a war, and in war sometimes you have to do things that maybe you wouldn't consider necessarily moral if you weren't at war. So you have this kind of propensity for, this capacity for brutality with the Michaelite Creed.
So this might be a creed that players who are creating a character around maybe their more physical stats might be drawn to.
Yes, they might be, but I don't want to give the impression with the creeds that it is as simple as that. Mm. So yes, if you are a physical character, if you are a warrior, if you are the class and background that we have in City, you've got an executioner as your sort of warrior class. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who is like that has to be a Michaelite, or that every Michaelite is like that. Mm. It is this kind of, it is this attitude of the war that must be fought and the war that must be won against the forces of evil, against the forces that threaten Christianity. So you can have a kind of intellectual take on that, but it's kind of about your morality. It's about what you think are necessary evils, necessary sins, perhaps, and what you think are the most important things, your convictions, your most important moral values. And for the Michaelites, as I said, it is this idea of you must fight for Christianity, you must fight evil, and there can be no compromise. And certainly pagans and non-Christians, the Michaelites take a very dim view of the idea of trying to reach an understanding or an accord with non-Christians. These are the enemy.
Well, speaking of reaching an understanding and accord with non-Christians, our next creed is, of course, the Longinian Creed. And these have a different philosophy towards this entire war, as it is, would you say?
Yes, so the Longinian Creed is the shield at the top. So you'll see the spear of Longinus, the Holy Lance, and a dragon, red dragon, on the right-hand side. These are the Longinians. So the Longinian Creed are the converted faithful. And they are, in a sense, the opposite to the Michaelites on some issues. So whilst the Michaelites have this quite unforgiving view of non-Christians, the Longinians are the opposite. The Longinians, effectively their mission, like their namesake Longinus, who was, as the story goes, he was a Roman legionary who pierced the side of Christ with his holy lance, and he then converted to Christianity. He became a Christian. So the message of the Longinians is that everybody in the world can be and should be converted to Christianity. And the Longinians also, they don't necessarily have a problem with pagans and with people that were previously not Christians retaining some of their old traditions, continuing to respect their own culture, the way their ancestors did things. They're not so bothered about that, but they are this kind of evangelical creed. So their mission is to peacefully convert everybody to Christianity, and then that is how Christianity is going to ultimately win.
And of course, evangelizing does have a sort of darker side to it as well. In some regards, you can't necessarily peacefully convert, then that's when you might call the Michaelites, right?
Well, yes, well, the sort of nice, quote-unquote, side of the Longinians is this idea of this sort of tolerant, kind of almost quite progressive creed that is understanding of people's kind of cultures, where they came from, people's religious differences. They're not necessarily trying to hold people to a super orthodox kind of religious line. You can still have your old traditions and your old culture and things to a certain extent. But on the other hand, you have got these are the evangelicals. These are the converters, and there is a darker side to that. You can have this kind of the darker edge to the Longinian Creed of these people going around and attempting to mass convert areas that aren't Christian, and you can see how there could be some darker implications to that. So some of the sort of acceptable sins of the Longinian Creed point to this kind of idea of bringing people into the Christian faith potentially against their will. And of course the other edge to the Longinian Creed is that they are the closest to pagans of the four creeds. So you have that potential for Longinians to perhaps be too into the pagan toleration aspect, and actually perhaps through that, particularly when you think about the vigilant order of people hunting demons and fighting demons and trying to prevent these evil forces from having an impact in the world, the Longinians being perhaps too comfortable with non-Christian elements, you could see how that could potentially go wrong. Longinians could potentially inadvertently end up under the sway of a demon, perhaps deliberately end up working with a demon.
So then, we've talked about the Michaelites, talked about the Longinians. Next up we have the Junians. What would you like to tell us about the Junians?
Yes, so the Junians, you'll see the symbol at the bottom there with the fish, with the two sort of cherubs either side. The Junians are the original followers. That's the tagline of the Junian Creed. So the Junian Creed kind of claim this sort of supremacy over the other creeds. They claim that they are the people who are the closest to Christ and to the original followers of Christ, the apostles and such like. And they pride themselves on having a connection to Christianity that goes way back through history. Perhaps they have been Christians for many centuries. Their ancestors have been oppressed for being Christians back before, back in the times when the Roman Empire and there were no Christian states or Christian powers around, and Christians were frequently tortured or executed and all the rest of it, martyred. And they claim that kind of supremacy, that they are the closest to Christ. They have a connection to Christianity that stretches back, and in a sense they kind of look down on the other creeds. They are thought of on a positive side. They in some ways they are much closer to the more kind of tender and kind teachings of Christ. So Junians are often very heavily focused and very heavily put a lot of stock in the idea of being kind to women, to children, to the vulnerable, the poor, to people who Christ, in the stories of Christ in the Bible, in the New Testament, a lot of what Christ was saying. He was going around and he was gentle and he was kind and he was forgiving. But on the other hand, the Junians are sort of like the judges. They are often, along with the Michaelites, they are often in these kind of senior positions in the church, and these are the people that go around persecuting other Christians, declaring other Christians to be heretics, to not be good enough Christians, to not have the right beliefs, or to be following Christ in the right way. And they do that because they have this kind of supremacist bent, this idea that they are the best Christians and they know better. And so you have, on the one hand, you have this kind of kind, charitable kind of soul that helps vulnerable people and marginalised groups. And on the other hand, you have this kind of inquisitor, this judge, jury, executioner that's going to go around accusing other Christians of not being Christian enough and persecuting them for that.
And there's always a hypocrisy in there, isn't there, somewhere?
Yes, I mean, you could say that there are kind of two ways to practice the Junian Creed. I think there's a few ways to interpret each creed. As I said, like, you can interpret the Junian Creed from the position of I'm going to help the poor, I'm going to help women, children, the blind, I'm going to go around trying to cure lepers and things like that. But you can also have this stern, judgmental, inquisitor-like figure that's going around persecuting other Christians for not being Christian enough or not being the right kind of Christians they see.
So we only have one shield left.
Yes.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about the Augustinians, the owner of that particular shield?
So the shield on the right, yes, which has got the cross, and below it the eye in the pyramid. I can't remember what the exact name of that is. Is it the Eye of Providence, they call that?
Sounds right.
I think that's what they call it in the modern day, because it's sort of the Masons use it and things. But yes, that's the symbol of the Augustinian Creed. Now, in the kind of law terms of City of God, the Augustinian Creed is perhaps one of the most interesting. So the Augustinian Creed is named after Saint Augustine of Hippo. And Saint Augustine of Hippo, of course, wrote the book City of God, which is what the game is named after. It's the very sort of seminal early Christian theological text written by Saint Augustine. In the canon of City of God, Saint Augustine is this figure who he was effectively one of the earliest people to recognise the threat that these kind of demonic, evil, primordial forces, the threat that they had to Christianity, and he recognised that these forces were gathering in strength and were threatening the Christian Roman Empire and were going to bring the whole thing down. He originally founded the Vigilant Order as this Christian group of exorcists and demon hunters that were going to fight back and were going to stop these figures from these kind of demonic figures, or these people that were influenced by demons, from destroying Rome, bringing down the City of God itself. Rome as the City of God, and the Roman Empire, the Christian Roman Empire, as this kind of society, this Christian society that was what they wanted. It was the kind of world they wanted to live in. Ultimately, St. Augustine failed to save Rome. He failed to save the Roman Empire. And the Vigilant Order for a while went away, and then came back again later on, a while after St. Augustine had died. It was refounded to try to fight back and try to resist these evil forces that seem to be gaining strength, particularly since the fall of the Roman Empire. So the Augustinian Creed is kind of they're the scholars. They're the scholars, and they are the bookworms, I guess you'd say. But they are also the people who are the most, in some ways, knowledgeable and committed to specifically this kind of esoteric struggle against demons, against these supernatural elements. So the other three creeds are involved in the Vigilant Order, yes, but as they founded it, the Augustinians kind of they think of themselves as being like the real Vigilant Order, or the people who are the most committed to the concept of the Vigilant Order. So that's what you have in the Augustinian Creed. It's the classic Augustinian is this sort of esoteric scholar, this demonologist, somebody who's read all these books, can speak all these strange languages, knows all about about demons, about demon hunting. But then on the other hand, you have this kind of element of the Augustinians are the people who are almost the most vulnerable to these forces, because they are relentless in their pursuit of knowledge, in wanting to learn all about demons, learn all about these forces that they fight against, and as a result of that, they are vulnerable to perhaps look too deeply or find out too much, and perhaps fall to that evil themselves.
There's something almost Lovecraftian in the pursuit of knowledge corrupting these Augustinians, isn't there?
Yeah, and the other negative trait of the Augustinians is they can be a bit pretentious. They can be a bit pompous about their knowledge, a little bit too intellectual, a little bit kind of look down their nose at people. Not quite in the same way as the Junians. All the creeds are capable of looking down at people, but the Augustinians have that kind of element of like, we're smarter than all of you, we know more than all of you.
So how do these creeds interact within the Vigilant Order then? Do they all play nice, or is there maybe a little bit of tension here and there?
Well, there's certainly a lot of tension. I mean, you can see immediately from hearing about what these creeds believe, how they could clash with each other. So the Junian and the Longinian creed, for example, they would clash on this idea of what's a real Christian? What's the best kind of Christian? And they all clash on that to some extent, but then there's this kind of argument implicit between those two creeds of, well, one creed strongly believes in converting, and they have this kind of respect, this reverence for not just people who've converted to Christianity, like Longinius, their founder, or certainly their namesake, but also they have this kind of reverence for the old cultures, the old traditions that those people maybe bring with them into Christianity. Junians is the complete opposite. The Junians are, the closer you can trace your Christianity back to Jesus himself, back to Jesus and his original followers of Jesus, the more Christian you are. These are people who take stock in, their father and mother were Christians, their grandparents were Christians, their great-grandparents were Christians. But there's in some ways the Longinians almost would consider converts to almost be better Christians because they've made that choice. They've made that conscious choice to become Christians. They weren't just born into it. In terms of attitudes towards pagans, non-Christians, you have this tension between the Longinians and the Michaelites, which we talked about, we've already talked about. Between the Junians and the Augustinians, you might have this tension between them on this issue of this forbidden knowledge and this law in reading and learning about demons, reading these texts that are potentially dark, corrupted texts, engaging with these artifacts, things that are demonic or supernatural in nature. Junians being judgmental, being on the lookout for heresies within Christianity, within Christians that fall short of their expectations. You can imagine a tension there between the almost witchy Augustinians and these very prim and proper Junians.
But then, of course, all these creeds within the Vigilant Order do work together and actually benefit from cooperation, don't they?
They do, and then there are things that they can agree on as well. The Longinians and the Junians perhaps being more tender, more kind of focused on charity and on helping the weak and the poor and things like that. There's a sort of an area of agreement there. Between the Michaelites and the Junians, there's a lot of cooperation and collaboration there, where you have kind of the Junians as the Justicia, as the kind of the pen, and the Michaelites as the sword.
So you might see in a typical party then a sort of mix of these creeds, all sort of cooperating, all using their strengths and reinforcing each other's weaknesses.
Yes, that would be the hope. Is that these creeds, in game terms, they serve as a means for mechanicalizing differing views, differing worldviews, different perceptions of what is right and wrong between players, and that can create these very interesting dynamics between the missionaries that the players create when they're role-playing together as a group, as a party of missionaries. These different worldviews, these different moral conceptions, the interplay between them and the way in which that they work together or perhaps clash, that's designed to be conducive towards role-play and interesting role-play, interesting character dynamics. You could also, you could have a party where everybody was the same creed. That might also be interesting. That might also have its own dynamics, its own elements that are interesting. Perhaps, if you were all going to be of the same creed, all the missionaries could explore different elements of the creed. There are different sort of sub-factions or ways of thinking within the creed, which is kind of what I've been explaining when I've been going through the creeds themselves, how there's room for difference, there's room for differing interpretations within the creeds as well as between them.
So I suppose the most important question is, when and where can players learn more about these creeds?
Well, players can learn more about these creeds by buying the City of God core rulebook when it is re-released on the 31st of October 2024. So on Halloween, the City of God core rulebook will be released, it will be available to buy, and you'll be able to buy this revised version of the core rulebook and learn all about the creeds in there.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's all from us this evening. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Bryn, for telling us all about the creeds.
No problem.
And that's goodbye. Remember, Fiat Voluntas Dei.
Yes, Fiat Voluntas Dei.